Did you ever notice pro wrestlers just can't seem to stay retired? Well, I happen to know a thing or two about that. I'm Mike Quackenbush. This is Till We Make It, and if you're passionate about the craft of professional wrestling and want to forge a legacy that you can be proud of, be sure to subscribe to my channel now so you never miss a video. Today's topic: why can't pro wrestlers seem to stay retired? You may know, I retired at the top of 2000. I turned down offers from two prominent wrestling organizations here in the United States, and I didn't see how I could get more out of what I was capable of producing at that time. In addition to which, I was feeling really burnt out. The two heaviest traveling years of my entire wrestling career were 1998 and 1999. And I wanted to see if I was able to do other things. And I was afraid that if I waited much longer to start these other endeavors, maybe I would never get a chance. Maybe I would end up with a resume that only had one thing on it, and that one thing might prevent me from being able to make a living later on in life. And so, at age 24, I tried to get out. And during that time that I was off, I worked on my second book, Headquarters. I wrote and produced a direct-to-video project, and then, not long thereafter, wrestling roped me right back in. And shortly after my return, my so-called retirement was pretty much instantly forgotten. And I retired once again in April of 2013 after a tag team match in Secaucus, New Jersey, when I was fortunate enough to team with my lifelong idol, Jushin Thunder Liger. Unfortunately for me, in that match, I suffered a pretty horrific injury. A terrible accident saw me shatter my right leg during that match. And because of boneheadedness in not seeking immediate medical attention for this injury, I ended up creating a complicating effect, which caused some instability that came up the entire right side of my body into my lower back, and for years that followed, I had to walk with a cane most days. I was fairly certain I would never wrestle again after that, and for the next 3 years, I did not. It was not until May of 2016 when an old friend invited me to share the ring with him one last time. And it was such a tempting offer, well, I just couldn't say no. So after trying twice myself to no avail and being met with some criticism each time I returned for my relative inability to stay retired, I decided to look at a broader trend. Why can't professional wrestlers stay retired? And to really answer this question, we've got to look into what fuels those retirements in the first place. Some retirements are purely for narrative purposes. They provide a storyline justification for a performer who needs to take a year off to start a family. They must undergo some medical treatment, or maybe they're becoming the primary caregiver for a loved one. Some retirements are called retirements just for lack of a better term. In truth, the break I took back in the year 2000 was more of a hiatus. I just didn't think anybody in wrestling called them hiatuses. So, retirement seemed like a better fit. Some wrestlers retire hoping that when they make their inevitable return, they will have been missed and will return finding that they are more appreciated, or at least less taken for granted than they were before they entered into retirement. And I don't know anybody that's had any luck employing that particular strategy. I happen to think that most wrestlers announce their retirement as a method of making them somewhat accountable to stay away. Because most professional wrestlers appreciate how tempting it will be to get back in the ring at some point. There are very few things in life which can adequately replace the thrill of making live combat theater in the ring, or replace the joy of being in front of a live audience. And so, by declaring their retirement, what they're really doing is making known their aspiration They are trying to say, I hope to stay away. Of course, staying away is very difficult to do because becoming a professional wrestler means adopting a lifestyle and immersing yourself in a culture which is rarely understood outside of that particular bubble. It's not even understood by wrestling fans, let alone by those completely uninitiated to the world of professional wrestling. And let's be honest about it, there is an allure to having a normal life. There must be some novelty to being a normie, imagining that the grass over on the other side is greener, lusher, or in some other way so much better than the grass we have over here on this side of the fence. And the truth is, more times than not, that does not prove to be the case. Normal life isn't better, but it is unfamiliar. And worse, retreating to normal life means being surrounded by people who, by and large, cannot relate to your life's experiences, and that feels very alienating. When you are surrounded by people that don't relate to your life's work, they can't understand your accomplishments. They have no context for appreciating all the trials, the wins and the losses that you have gone through. That whole experience can be very alienating, and that brings on feelings of loneliness, if not being misunderstood. Just hearing all of this, it's easy to understand why someone in that position might crave a return to the ring. They crave a return to the familiar surroundings, a familiar culture, familiar people, a familiar environment. I happen to think it is for exactly these reasons why professional wrestlers just can't seem to stay retired. The adjustment to normal life, whatever that might mean in their imaginations, proves so difficult, or a transition which is impossible to make entirely. It is easy to return to the familiar where they feel accepted and validated. And like I intoned just a moment ago, it is very difficult to find something which adequately replaces what we feel being on stage in front of a live audience, performing for their reactions. If the next step in your wrestling career is to create more dynamic and engaging performances each and every time, you are between the ropes. I want to give you my toolbox. Toolbox Building Better Pro Wrestling is my new book that dives heavily into the structure and the performance of professional wrestling for modern audiences. It's available right now. You can get print copies or a digital copy from the fine folks over at Amazon and through Kindle. An audiobook version through Audible, I swear, isn't all that far away.